What the city is talking about. This is Montreal Now on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
The score in Terrebonne cannot go unnoticed. It's there.
Yeah.
And it's solid.
Yeah.
So it means something to the government. It means something for the next steps for the Parti québécois. It doesn't guarantee anything, so we don't take anything for granted. But you cannot get a stronger signal in a by-election than 53%.
Okay. That is Paul St. Pierre Plamondon talking about the fact that the PQ won that Terrebonne riding by-election yesterday by a very, very wide margin. James Mennie is on the line over at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, we've talked about this before. We talked about it yesterday. I think, to be fair, everyone thought the PQ would win. I guess the question here is, it's not so much that they got 53%, it's how much they beat the CAQ by.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, it's not just the CAQ that should be asking themselves some questions, but I have to tell you, I listened to that clip of Paul St. Pierre Plamondon, head of the PQ, and it's kind of, when you hear him talk like that, you kind of wish, I kind of wish he was in charge, because the guy sounds like he actually knows what he's talking about, although the problem is the backstory in this party is where all the chaos is. But all that said, yes, the people of Terrebonne once again chose the Parti québécois and did so by a tremendous margin. The CAQ, the hapless CAQ, couldn't even get 29% of the vote. But here's the thing, Aaron. All this is not going on in a vacuum. When you look at the performance of the Liberals and Québec Solidaire in that same riding, I'm not saying they were going to win. I'm not saying even they had to be close to winning. But for the Liberals, who are strutting around, snapping their suspenders, as we say in these parts, with their léger poll, having them, in second place with the CAQ, to get less than 2,000 votes, to get less than 10% of the vote in that very, very publicized by-election. I know even Marc Tanguay at the beginning, before any of this stuff with Trump had happened, Tanguay was going, well, our chances aren't that good, blah, 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 blah. But honestly, Aaron, it's the brand. I don't think people make that distinction or are that deep inside baseball that they make the distinction between a by-election and the party. And what gets me here is, you have a chance to go out and let people know that we're around, that we exist. And guess what? We have someone named Virginie Bouchard, as opposed to Frédéric Beauchemin and Pablo Rodriguez and Marc Tanguay and all the big names, that there's the rank and file. And those are, in fact, Aaron, the people who win you elections. And I get the impression that they didn't do that. Québec Solidaire, their psychodrama, they're the authors of their own misfortune. They barely got over 1,000 votes. But they're far more concerned, I think, about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin than they are about winning elections. I think we've heard the last of Québec Solidaire in this electoral cycle. And I will cut some slack for Éric Duhaime for the Conservatives showing there, if only because their leader had a heart attack during the campaign. But all that said, I was not surprised by the PQ, and indeed not by the fact that they turned their backs, the people of Terrebonne turned their backs on the CAQ, but the performance of the PLQ and the QS, but mostly the PLQ, I find that is a big fat red flag. I hope someone over at the Quebec Liberal Party, our motto, we're the smartest people in the room, realize they're the smartest people in the room and realize this is a big fat red flag. Don't take anything for granted. And I'll tell you something else before I leave this, Aaron. PQ stronghold, they didn't have a chance. They were voting from 76 to 2008, 32 years, for the Parti québécois. And guess what? In 2008, everyone found a new flavor called the Action démocratique Québec. They voted for them. And then that flash, went through the pan, and they voted back went back to the PQ. But then again, in 2018, 2022, they were handing Pierre Fitzgibbon of the CAQ huge plurality. So this idea that it's a shot before, I think the people of Terrebonne simply know which side their bread is buttered on, and at the moment, it's safe to have it buttered on the side of the PQ. That may change, as Monsieur St. Pierre Plamondon suggested in that quote. That could change by the time the next general rolls around. But right now, I think we're seeing not so much a ringing endorsement of the Parti québécois, as we are a real repudiation of anybody who went up against them yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's more accurate. Maybe Francois Legault should take a hint here and stop showing up in ridings that are holding by-elections, right? He did it in Jean Talon. He did it here. He was out there knocking on doors with their candidate and ended up getting trounced. Maybe it's time he just, stay back in Quebec City.
I know you roll your eyes and you think I'm pushing my shopping cart down St. Catherine Street when I say this, but the fact is, I wouldn't be surprised if Monsieur Legault was not around for the next election.
Well. Okay. Let me leave it at that and go to federal politics. We have another poll out suggesting Mark Carney, by virtue of not having done a whole lot other than, answer a couple of questions here and make a speech here and there, has polled, believe it or not, the federal Liberals ahead of the Conservatives. And if I got this right, Jim, if an election, as they say, were held today, the Liberals could win a majority?
Absolutely. The Léger's got them 42, a jump of 5 points, over 39 for the Conservatives. And back in the day, when all these numbers used to be new, we have to point out the Conservative Party of Canada's support is stacked up inefficiently out west. So, and if you look at the breakdown, they are just running the table. I've unheard of. The Liberal Party of Canada, under Mark Carney, is running the table in Quebec, which is absolutely crazy. They are at 40, in the low 40s, ahead of the Bloc, which is, I think, at 24, and the Tories in Quebec, who are at 22 or 23. So it's no contest. And indeed, the other survey I mentioned to you, Angus Reid, has the Liberals at 42% and the Conservatives at 37%. However, what I find particularly interesting, and for I guess a remaining small number of our listeners here in Quebec, but certainly people across the country, both polls have the NDP at, wait for it, 9%. Wow. So they need going. As far as I'm concerned, they might be going to have coffee and a donut with Francois Legault before this is over.
Isn't that something? How amazing that things have changed the way they have. We've talked about that so many times since Justin Trudeau resigned. But there you go.
But all that said, Aaron, I think we have to reiterate, and I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. But right now, you talk about momentum; it is everywhere. And I heard you talking to Carlton Clare before, and yes, there are all kinds of issues that the Tories, and to a certain extent the media, would like to have fun with. Although, as I say, a lot of it's very inside baseball. And unless you make it simple, people's eyes are just going to roll over. I mean, unfortunately, the one big in, or the one big possibility for the Conservatives, they can't sum up in a three-word slogan. So they may have a real challenge there. But all that said, the sooner you call an election, my friend, and the sooner you go to the polls, the better. People clearly are, we're in third gear on this. We're rolling. And I don't think the Liberals can afford to jerk around with any kind of, soul searching, whatever, or back in the day of Justin Trudeau kind of sighing deeply and wondering about the fallout. Just go for it. Just go. And we'll, when the dust settles, we'll see what's going to happen. But I really don't think the federal Liberals under anybody have a better chance of forming a majority government than they do right here and right now, but at this very moment, Aaron.
So we know the call is going to come, Jim, within a matter of days. I mean, you have to wonder why just keep, they're not, I'm sure, first of all, they're looking at polls, right? They know what's going on. So why not pull the plug right now and just say, we're going to an election? Why the suspense of waiting another day and another day?
I like to think this is all very clever, and there's someone there who's got a sense of drama, someone who's stage managing this, someone with a certain amount of panache. They may turn around and, the old, not at 5 o'clock, but if you call a press conference at noon on Friday, a sudden press conference, Mark Carney will be holding a press conference, blah, 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 or you leak it Friday morning. All of a sudden, you've got the whole news cycle to yourself. Mm-hmm. Everyone's going to be, it's going to be election coverage, wall to wall for all of that day. That would be one way to do it. But as I say, I don't think you're ever going to see that much momentum, that much of a boost for the Liberal Party of Canada as you see right now. And the longer they wait, I think the more that will play into the hands of the Conservatives. The Conservatives need time. They got to catch their breath. They have to actually, rethink their strategy from scratch, because a lot of that got blown out the airlock with the advent of Mark Carney and the departure of Justin Trudeau. So, we'll see how that goes. But as you say, it should be this week. It probably will be sooner rather than later. But if they go beyond this week, I think they really are playing with fire.
Jim, I want to go to the question I started the show with today, just real quick. I said I can't believe we're doing this, but hey, it's being talked about. The question was, should Canada now consider having compulsory military service? What do you think about that?
I don't know. I know when I was growing up, a lot of people that I grew up with, signed up with the reserves or the militia or whatever because it was cash and it was kind of like a part-time job. We don't really have that tradition in this country for call-ups and conscription has always been a very thorny issue in this country's history. We don't really have that. I know it's very, very common in Europe back in the day, and in fact. I grew up with some guys who, if they went back to their native country in Europe, would probably be facing either mandatory service or jail time for not having done that service. I don't think it's a part of who we are. I don't think it's ever been a part of who we are, so I don't think it's a great idea. I know the idea is, well, we'll bolster the forces by making people be in the military. If you don't have the equipment, if you don't have the leadership, if you don't have the objectives, the clearly drawn objectives, and the people who can do that, it doesn't matter how many people you have. You want an army, you want armed forces. You don't want to have a mob who's in there just to make some editorial writer feel good and say, oh, look, the numbers went up. Numbers don't count for anything. In these days of modern warfare, you don't fight big, you fight smart. And I'm not entirely sure that's our priority right now. Perhaps it will be. But I hope the days of our, renting used subs from Australia are over, and perhaps our approach to military service involves being more innovative than just drafting whoever's, hanging around.
James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.